to Miss Charmaine R.A. Valmonte.
Yeah, excuse me. Good morning. I'm your last briefing before lunch. I hope I can keep your attention. Am I audible? Can you?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so
Um,
let me go ahead and share my screen.
all right. By the way, Miss Valmonte, before we finally give you the floor, we would like to remind our audience to share a live stream using the official hashtag and then hashtag avoid this group. Just copy and paste those hashtags on the description. Right?
And now we will now officially give you the floor, Miss Charmaine. So whenever you're ready,
We
Miss.
can see your presentation now.
Perfect. All right. So yes, good morning, everybody. So I'm delighted to have in front of me in the briefers, Michelle, Mario, and our previous cyber defense or pen testing presenter. So I like to call most of my briefings, if you've seen me before, and I know our audience are all students. You're about to get into the workforce, or you're new in the workforce and want to see where you want to go in the field, right? And cybersecurity is quite huge, right? So I've learned a lot along the way, and I'll tell you about these stories over time, right? So I believe, or not I believe, but cybersecurity is not only a technical issue, although a lot of people may think that it is. It's actually a business issue. It's a life issue, actually, no? When you think about it. So we'll talk about why do we care. So why do we care? Ano ba tong cybersecurity, right? And I'll talk about that threat landscape, especially today and in the future. And we want to talk about why we keep it simple and how to secure that space and understanding how to secure a connected environment. So on the right, you're seeing, cybersecurity jobs. You notice that, right? By Cybersecurity Magazine, and this is very recent, I pulled this out. 3.5 million openings in 2025 globally. So you are in the right industry, you're in the right profession. And it's grown so much that you can choose where you want to be in that industry, right? And I always call it this profession because it is a service and support not only to organizations, to business, but to society as a whole, right? So I will talk about the cyber landscape, but from a different perspective, right? Our landscape has evolved over time. So there's a lot of technological improvements, right? Industry 4.0, this is the best thing that we've seen so far, right? Breakthrough technologies, smart devices, products, AI, or artificial intelligence, the use of robotics process automation. You are in a profession that allows you to be able to secure this digitalized environment, right? So there's a lot of words that you're seeing here, but I wanted you to key in on something. It means that we are now faced with a larger and greater environment, not just a little computer that used to sit in the office that was not necessarily connected to the internet. So those things that we're seeing today, right? Everyone has a mobile device. Sometimes you have two phones, a tablet, a smartwatch, a digital scale, a Fitbit, right? One of these examples, and I'll put it to life, right? And why I call it a business issue. We talked about all these digital items, but all these things that I just talked about really focusing on a technology that allows us to, that enables our lifestyle, right? So there are things like in the US or in the health industry, they came up with what we call, much like a Fitbit, right? But it allowed our lolos and lolas to be able for us to be able to take care of them, right? What does that mean? They have these smart watches, or it looks like a smart watch, but really what happens if they fell, right? If they slip, they're alone at home and they slip. This automatically calls out to the health department or the hospital that's nearby. It alerts you as the family member, so you can immediately um, attend to and head home and assist your loved one, right? This is automatic. So this capability is what I call the expansion of the cyber threat landscape. We can talk about all those things like all those attacks, all the technical jargon that Mario had talked about. That as a cybersecurity professional, when we approach the business, we have to explain it to them like an 8-year-old, like they were a child, right? Because that's what they understand. So it's a risk, right? We talk in reference to a risk. And through my presentation, I'll be talking about things that I've learned over time, right? As a CISO, I am learning not to speak in that technology language or using highfalutin words, thinking that I would impress my audience, but really to simplify what we do so that they can better understand and support the roadmap or where we want to go, right? So that's your threat landscape, really. I'll give you some statistics. And again, one of the key things to remember, cybercrime is going to continue to rise. It used to be that we'd talk about cybercrime or cyber threat landscape in terms of what's happening out there and everything, who's been hacked, what's going on. And I'll have a few examples of those in my preceding slide. But as much as we're needing that many cybersecurity professionals, this is the reason, because cybercrime is global and it's expected to cost 10.5 trillion per year, not in an aggregate, but per year by 2025, and this is provided by Cyber Magazine or Cybercrime Magazine. It's so global that example I just told you, there's actually a magazine that says Cybercrime Magazine, right? 10, 15 years ago, that there's no such magazine, right? That's how important that environment is. And we also talk about having old school solutions, your antivirus versus your endpoint security. It's almost like saying, I'm going to continue to use my Windows 98 laptop and connect it to the internet. We all know that is not advisable or recommended from a security perspective, right? Simply because we know that it's so old you can't even update or secure it, right? So you have to get something that is updated. You're able to patch, right? You've got to spend a little bit of money to get that new device, right? That has the latest operating system, right? Along with the technologies that we're kind of used to and we enjoy, there's still that piece that talks about what your adversaries or what your cyber attackers doing. They're doing the most basic things, the spray and pray, right? The social engineering scams, the things that get people in trouble by clicking on their links, right? Clicking links on their phone. Today you have your mobile phone. It's unheard of to have a Nokia, 3210, right? As our previous speaker had talked about, right? So these social engineering scams is quite simple, right? They take advantage of this technology that we're so used to, right? I'll give you an example. When you are in an environment and you're going into a coffee shop and you said, hey, I want to go ahead and I want to buy something on Shopee, right? And you decide, well, I don't have any data. Wala akong data, so makiki-Wi-Fi ako sa coffee shop, right? See, when we do that, that's us saying that, hey man, I'm gonna go into this environment. It's so unsecure, pero bahala na because I really want to buy this thing on Shopee or Lazada or what have you. And we started doing our um, e-commerce, right? And I'll talk about what that looks like and why that's so important. So right then and there, it's easy, right? I could get social engineered by saying, hey, there's a Lazada 33, click this link. I didn't pay attention because I was picking up on an opportunity to go ahead and do some shopping while I'm having my coffee at the shop, right? And lo and behold, I click on that link, right? And next thing you know, they're on my phone, they're on my environment. And they're basically picking up all the data sets, all the information that they need in order to use my access to an important system in my environment. Let's say at work, my credentials. This is what we call an account takeover. Very technical speak, but really what it's saying is somebody stole my credentials and they're using it to get into the office environment. So what about that threat landscape? And we can talk about the different types, the man in the middle, the ransomware, ransom attack, malware, the different types of malware, all those things, but they're too technical from a business perspective. But you gotta know that you don't have to be a cyber geek or a pen tester today. You can actually shop for these services. It's called RAS, right? Ransomware as a service. So you go on the dark side, and this is an example on the left-hand side. There's quite a few in that site, right? So the democratization of cybercrime, it's easy, right? So I can actually hire, or I can get the services or even download the software to be able to do something to an environment. So I want to go ahead and hack an environment. It's quite easy because there's a shopping mall for it, right? Cyber criminals are all over the place. And today you're seeing that, right? And this ransomware as a service, these groups, an example is the dark side, right? So one of those things that why it matters, it's because we have this digital economy like I talked about, right? We don't have malls that we walk into and go shopping. We have now moved to the digital space where we're, sliding or what do you call this? Shift left, shift right, right? Swipe left, swipe right. And that's how we shop. So that's that computing technology. We can shop Amazon from where we're sitting at today, right? We utilize and enable technology. We buy things online, right? Most recently, there were some things that happened in the financial industry, right? A very big issue that really affected the organization's reputation, right? Because we do business online. So everything is an e-business and e-commerce, these things are all connected because we need to be able to buy that endpoint, buy that service, right? Or buy that merchandise that we want to do and get it delivered at home, right? Even the delivery is automated, right? You can flip and pretty much choose who's going to be doing your delivery service, right? But they all these data resides in somewhere. It's called the cloud, right? But the cloud is not cloud in the sky, right? The cloud is in some data center in provided by the cloud security or cloud providers, right? There are definitely different types of cloud providers out there. So what I'm saying is, as much as we have a digital economy in the world, what we're doing, likewise, the cyber criminals are doing the same thing. As I showed you in the previous slide, they have their own marketplace. And they can actually get together with other cyber criminals, these syndicates that allow you or that allow them. You don't have to code. You don't need to be a coder, right? Previously, it's I have to be able to code in order for me to be able to hack someone. Today, it's no longer that, right? I can go on a digital marketplace and say, I want to go ahead and do an account takeover, and here are the account takeover services, right? I want to steal all the data from this particular hospital, or from, or if I were an attacker, that is, I want to take as much data as I can from an organization so I can do something. I can do a lot of things with data that's personal identifiable, with some credit card numbers, with where they are. I can do so much of those. They even cost, and I'm sure in your next briefings and presentations will cover that, right? So that's your cyber threat landscape, the opportunity for the cyber criminal to really play and find their prey, right? It's not hard for a cyber criminal to do that, right? So what I mean by attackers do not care, they don't care if you're a big company, a small company, a mom and pops, right? But what happens to us when we get attacked? You've seen on the news, Colonial Pipeline. That's one of the pipelines in the U.S., mid to East Coast. And really, when they got hacked, there's a lot of reputational damages they'd had to really contend with, right? And if you look online, and these are snippets that I've gathered, I don't take ownership of these. Look at this one on the lower left-hand side, right? This one really talks about how the biggest attack of 20 went down. And if you see that big sign right there, right? That big, humongous sign, that's really telling the world, man, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do something. I don't want to do business with SolarWinds or so. Why? Because of that piece right there, right? That was 5 minutes, must have been a minute snippet on the news, but look at the extent of how much it was all over the internet in less than 5 minutes or so, right? So there's reputational damages that really, besides the fines and penalties that you're going to get, right, for not having the proper hygiene, for not protecting environment, right? This is the things that really affect your business. And naturally, cyber attacks on the financial sector, because we are in that digital economy, really affects the business, no matter if you're a mom and pop shop, a small business, or a big business. In fact, in most cases, a bigger organization may ensue some reputational damages, but a smaller business who doesn't really have that big of a reach in terms of in the marketplace, if they get attacked, may naturally just take their whole business down because they don't have the insurance, or enough of the funding, or enough shareholders to keep and protect their organization. And unfortunately, these organizations will suffer and fold, right? So there's many things that we need to understand. Getting attacked, it's not something that you want to have happen, but you must be prepared as an organization. That's why we always say it's a business issue. It's not just a technological issue anymore, right? Because it affects your bottom line, your shareholders, your stock prices, right? These things affect the organization because these things are on the news. Imagine the JBS Foods industry or manufacturing, right? When they got hacked, imagine how much of a plummet in their stocks happened during their event, right? I used to present, and listening to Mario earlier, I used to present in this way. I used to talk about, remote data dumps, root access, cross-site scripting to the board. It's not going to help, right? I wanted to link this into that because board members, the board or the business doesn't understand all these magical words we're talking about, right? But it allows us to be able to talk about and remember key points, right? So those things that are important really to remember is to keep it really simple, right? So you need to think about your organization's cybersecurity or security operations or your technology. And I'm speaking if you were in a position that you were a CISO, which where I'm sitting at the moment, is understanding that you need to find the ability, ensure that you're really keyed in on the specifics of your profession, right? CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. I cannot stress this enough. And if you think these terms, this mindset, you'll be able to identify, right, that you need to make sure that everything has to be based on identity, and we need to protect the session, and we need to provide the least privilege to users and to endpoints or end devices. Because today, not only must we worry about the access of our users, but also the access of their end devices, right? The old way of doing things was such that we would provide identity and access to a user, and it was all day long, 24 hours, as long as I give you the access, because I already said it's you're allowed. You can do and access your system any time of the day, right? So it's a universal access for me to get into the system, right? Today, we need to remember that those things cannot happen because that's like an open door that's kept wide open. And for me, so as long as I have an ID card, I can get into that door any time of the day, right? Whereas if we talk about you can get access to your system, but only from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. If you access your system outside of those hours, you can't. Right? So it's a session-based, right? Earlier, your first discussion was talking about being able to become, or if you want to get into application security testing or being a quality assurance or quality engineer, right? Remember, and she talked about looking at a user's access into the system, right? So we're tying these things together. It has to be identity based, it has to be session based, and there has to be some semblance of least privilege, right, in it. And that least privilege means that there is only certain things I can do on a system. Charmaine cannot do HR, payroll, or access to those things because she works in cyber. She has nothing to do with HR or employee files and 201 files, right? But she can definitely look at her 201 file. That's the principle of least privilege. And when you think about keeping it simple, you have all these things called point solutions. I have a firewall, I have an identity access management system, I have an Active Directory, I have multi-factor authentication, all these things, all these technologies we put, what we call the technology stack, right? When we have an on-premise solution, it's quite easy because we are managing that environment. We control that environment. We built the firewalls, we had layered security, we have access management, we put in 3 or 4 layers of defense, we have network security solutions. But those are point solutions we put together to make work, right? Meaning we develop that environment to make it sync with one another, integrate with one another. And it's not necessarily easy to do that. So to simplify that world, you need to look in at services that allow you to provide that ability to have those systems talk to one another, sync well with one another, and you don't have a problem with latency for the user. Because we are no longer the department of no, right? Traditionally, we used to say, I will say no and then I will investigate. Then eventually I'll look and check, and then I will say yes, right? And from a business perspective, this creates some angst among your business partners and shareholders and even operations in the business, because they really do not want to go to security, because they'll say, well, what, if I go to security, she's going to say no, right? Before she even says yes. But there's also that mindset that you need to put into place, that you need to allow the organization to learn, right? And educating the organization is in that sense. So the mindset that I talked about earlier of CIA, you are going to get this ingrained to you. You have had this ingrained into you. These are still those concepts that will allow you to utilize these and apply them to your organization, to your operations, in whatever form of the ladder or in level of the organization you are in, right? And I added something to the identification, authorization, authentication, accountability. I added administration, because that's really important that we know what's going on in that environment. We manage that environment. So one of the questions, and easily I was able to, this is basically how I transformed or learned over time, right? As a security professional, we had to speak to the board. And again, I'm caveating from Mario's presentation and understanding where the business wants to go. But really, as we get complicated, and we talk about how all this technology allows us to connect with one another, have the ability to check our vitals on our smartphones and all that. But really, the main thing that you have to remember is you have to keep it secure. Your identity, your access, how long you have access to it, and the data has to be secure from end to end, right? Think about it from a user's perspective. When they log into a system, whether they're logging in from a computer or they're logging into a mobile device, the identity has to be protected from beginning as it's transacted, communicating towards to the end, right? To the end application that they need to get into. And thinking about all the different levels, right? You have the front end, you have the middleware, and then you have the back end. So CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability across those three spectrums. So I didn't mention anything that was highfalutin, didn't I? I didn't talk about, oh, you got to use this type of technology for this. Those things we understand as technical people. The business understands simple terms. Like I said, like Mario was talking about, 8th grade levels or 8-year-old levels for that matter, right? But the organization will continue to go to cloud. And we can expect that they'll use different types of technologies. They'll consume a multi-cloud environment. We need to be able to understand how to support the user's movement to that environment. I want to consume something on AWS. I also want to consume something on Google Cloud. And I also want to use something on Azure. That's the organization. We can't stop that, right? But we can get ahead of it. But as we get ahead of it, we need to keep the simplest concepts of securing identity, your transmission, and securing data, right? On the move, being stored, when it's imputed. When you think about it in that way, that convoluted connected environment is simplified, right? So one of the key things to remember is this is how in the previous slide, I talked about how I used to talk about cybersecurity, terms, magical words, and I've learned over time. And this is how I presented it to the board, to the senior management, and this is what the business understands. We need technology to allow us to be able to break up a system, because if we get attacked, if one system is attacked, if you notice, this doesn't show anything about the different technology pieces that allow us to secure the environment. So we share a common architecture, we're centrally managed, we share a network. So this is common across, right? So attack to one is likely to traverse to others because we are in the same environment. Therefore, if you attack one, there's a higher risk to the entire environment, right? But if you break down that and segment that network, or let's not talk about segmenting, let's talk about the village, as I had it earlier. We start to build subdivisions, right? And put guards in those subdivisions. So if we get attacked, one subdivision is attacked, the others are okay, right? Therefore, it's a lower risk to your organization, right? If you notice, cybersecurity is mainly a tool, an enabler, so that we can secure and lower the risk to the organization. Therefore, at the end of it, the bottom line is we are saving or enabling the business to move in the direction they need to go in a secure way. One of the key things that you've seen so far, and I talked about, is that we have all this technology that we've enabled, right? But those that were attacked were all supply or vendors, right? SolarWinds is a vendor, right? Just like JBS Foods is a vendor, it's a manufacturing firm. Those are my examples there. But in essence, we connect to these services, don't we? Right? At some point in an organization, they kind of use SolarWinds, right? So we need to do what we call due diligence. And you've heard this while you were in school, in college, right? Due diligence and due care. So let's break that down. We are connected to that third party. We're connected to that service partner, right? And we need to also know that they're doing things correctly, or we can have a SolarWinds issue happen to us, right? Or we connect to a service provider that's not really doing things in a secure way. So thereby, you've extended your network because of the connection, whether it's physical connection or you've allowed them access to your environment, and they really utilize, an example is your service provider uses VNC or any of those free VPN capabilities, right? Because they want to, they don't want to spend that much because there are only 2 or 3 that kind of use it in their environment. And you can suddenly connect to them. And let's say they connect to your network and they have that 24/7 connection because they're maintaining your network. Guess what? You just put your environment, your secure environment, at risk, right? So what's really important is you need to be able to check who we are connected to. That's the business value. That is not a technology piece, right? It's almost saying that I don't want to do business with, or I don't want to have a neighbor who happens to be a criminal, because at some point that criminal may come up to my house and take things from my space, right? From my home, right? And the due diligence is understanding, going to and checking to see, doing the background checks on those people that live in that subdivision or that environment. And that simply is vendor risk management, because we rely on a supply chain. Our phones is a supply chain, right? You use an iPhone or an Android that is provided by a specific company, right? That's a service that's provided to you, right? So you gotta make sure that when you start computing on that end device, that you know that that's a safe piece of technology, right? Being able to identify, to protect what you have in terms of your end device or your systems and your organizations, and being able to see, right? You cannot secure something or an environment that you cannot see, right? It's like a village that cannot really be sure that they have all the gates, covered, right? So visibility is key, and your security services have to be part of the whole process. But the main thing really is education, right? Education and hygiene. So you have to be vigilant. You have to be prepared. You have to think that you're going to be attacked or you've been attacked, because you're going to think this way in order to become an organization who's resilient. Today, it's no longer about organizations putting in all the systems to protect them, but organizational resilience is such that you think as if you've been attacked. But understand that 95% of attacks are caused by humans, and this came from an IBM research, right? Because again, like we said, it's easy money. You can go and get ransom as a service. We know that the criminal will do something somewhere in some fashion, because either they went, in most cases, they want what we all want. We all want money, right? So the best way to get that, if you're going in the wrong direction, on the black side or the dark side, I want to get as much money as I can. So it doesn't matter who I attack. I'll attack everybody if I can get a lot of money, right? But it's important that we educate ourselves, right? We educate our team. We understand criminals will target anything, small or large businesses, because there is definitely a marketplace to do that, right? But the most important tool is education, you yourself and your team. And always have a game plan. Think as if you have been attacked. So one of the key things in the future fact is we are working everywhere by virtue of what we do today, right? Today we're doing this. We're working from home. We're working from cafes. The data center is no longer, right? The cloud is the data center. The network is the internet, right? But understand what we have today. Know what you have to secure. That means you got to see an inventory. One of the primary things that we learn as a cybersecurity professional is asset inventory. Know what you have so you know what to secure. But the next thing is data is also an asset. So knowing your data, what you do with it, how you consume it, so you can definitely understand how you're going to control access and what type of automation you're going to utilize for access management, right? And based on the data that you're going to secure, because you can't secure everything or your network or the systems will all halt to a stop, right? So you got to classify and contextualize the data. So understanding, just like asset management, I know where all computers are at. You're saying, I know where all data is at, and I know how to protect it. And I'm protecting the crown jewels, or what we say, the important data, the data that won't allow us to get pawned or owned by the red team, right? Or the cyber criminal. So that's how we develop eventually that cyber strategy. The cyber strategy is allowing us to be able to support where the business wants to go, right? A lot of organizations are transforming, digitizing, moving to the cloud. Everybody talks about cloud first. A lot of organizations are born and raised in the cloud, right? So that mindset, we secure differently on cloud than we do on premise because it's a different type of technology. But one thing is the same. It's the same concept: identity, access management, data security, right? Understanding who we're connected to, making sure that we do the due diligence for those service partners, business partners, and the like. And we need to train and keep training on those response procedures, right? The response procedures is saying, if we get ransom attacked, what do we do? If we get a denial of service attack, somebody hacks our website, it goes down, what do we do? Just like a basketball team who has to practice before they play the game on the weekend, or whom they are going to play up against, they practice. and they say, okay, these are the things we're going to do. Somebody's on point, somebody's on guard, and somebody's on forward. It's the same thing that we do with security. You train, right? Again, I used to be in the military, so we trained every single time on those specific basic things all day long, all month long, all year long. Why? Because when we get to a drop zone, an enemy territory, and I have been, from my experience, it was like second nature to move about, to know what to do when you're in enemy territory, right? It's the same concept with uh, the cyber threat landscape or internet. It's like dropping in on an environment in a coffee shop. You don't want to get into their connection because you know there's a lot of those people that are gonna jump and do a man in the middle or an account takeover because they're watching you. They're watching your connection and seeing if you're going to fall for it, right? Train and keep training, and in this time use security not as a blocker to how the business has to go and move about their strategy, but enable, be the support system that allows them to adjust and pivot based on their requirements in a secure way. So I want to change it by saying we want to work from everywhere, but we will work from everywhere securely. So with that, I will conclude my presentation and I'll take your questions.
All right, thank you so much for that, Ms. Charmaine.
We would like to ask you to stay for a bit for our question and answer portion. So for our participants, again, you may drop your questions in the comment section of our social media platform.
And while we are waiting for the questions from our audience, we will now choose our winners of our Hknl2022 shirts and LPI shirts for the best write-ups for Ms. Charmaine's topic. Just a moment, Ms. Charmaine. So let's proceed with the questions first, Ms. Charmaine.
So we have here question addressed to you, Ms. Charmaine. So in the cybersecurity world, what is your insight about ransomware victims paying the ransom? Are you in favor of that?
All right. One of the key things, that's a loaded question, but I will answer it. As a standard, we don't want to pay ransom. That's my take. The reason for that is it goes back to what I was saying earlier. When you practice and train, you know what you're going to do, and if you're confident. And the reason why people pay is because they didn't know how they got attacked, how their data got taken, and it unfortunately they didn't have the backup, right? But if you have trained and you've trained this and you say, this is the mindset. If I get attacked, this is what I'm going to do. A, B, C, D, and E. I also know that I have an incident response provider who's going to help me, right? Forensics that are allowed to do that. I guess that's the good thing about seeing it as an example from other companies, right? But don't pay the ransom. This is just a recommendation. Other business, now the business will think from a different perspective, right? And at the end of the day, it's the business decision. The CEO, the board of directors will say, okay, we'll pay the ransom. In some cases, there's a cost to it. From cyber ed, the cyber ed boards learned with Mario, experiences like Solar Winds talked to us about ransomware and the like. So there are things that you can do, but at the end of the day, my recommendation is such that don't pay the ransom, because even if you get the data, it's going to be broke, or the data that they give back to you, it's everybody else has that data, right?
All right, so thank you